Max Verstappen to McLaren. It sounds impossible, but behind the denials, the rumors, and the carefully chosen words, one question refuses to disappear. Could Formula One's most feared driver really join the team building the strongest threat to his future? There is no confirmed secret deal, but the clues have created a story too important to ignore. Because if even one part of it is true, Red Bull could lose its biggest weapon, McLaren could change the balance of power, and the entire driver market could explode. But the detail that matters most is not the rumor everyone is repeating. It is the reason this move could suddenly make sense. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this rumor became so powerful, you have to forget the idea that Formula One contracts are simple promises. They are not. A driver can be committed to a team, publicly loyal, and still have conditions hidden inside the agreement. Performance targets, exit options, deadlines, clauses that only become important when the car stops delivering what was expected. And that is where Max Verstappen's situation becomes impossible to ignore. Verstappen is not just another driver looking for a faster seat. He is the center of Red Bull's entire competitive identity. The car is developed around his feedback. The strategy is shaped around his ability to control races. The pressure he applies to rivals changes how other teams make decisions before the lights even go out. Removing him from Red Bull would be like removing the engine from a fighter jet. The structure may still be there, but the weapon is no longer the same. That is why the idea of McLaren entering the picture feels so disruptive. McLaren does not need Verstappen to become relevant. That is exactly what makes the possibility more dangerous. A struggling team can make desperate promises. A strong team can offer evidence, progress, stability, a car capable of fighting at the front. But there is an immediate problem. McLaren already has drivers it has invested in heavily. Drivers who understand the team, trust the people around them, and have helped build its recent momentum. Bringing Verstappen into that environment would not be a normal signing. It would force McLaren to disturb something that is already working. And teams rarely destroy harmony without a reason. So the real question is not whether McLaren would want Max Verstappen. Every team would want a driver with his speed, aggression, and ability to deliver under pressure. The real question is what McLaren would be willing to sacrifice to get him. Because signing a superstar does not only affect one seat. It changes contracts, salaries, sponsorships, team politics, and the balance of power between the drivers. It can turn teammates into rivals before the first race has even begun. Imagine two people carrying a table through a narrow doorway. Everything works when they move together. But add a third person, especially one who insists on choosing the direction, and suddenly every step becomes a negotiation. That is the risk. Verstappen would not arrive as a quiet addition. He would arrive as the most powerful figure inside the garage. Every technical problem would become more urgent. Every strategic mistake would become more visible. And every disagreement would create headlines far beyond the team. Yet McLaren might still consider it. Not because the team lacks talent. Not because its current drivers have failed. But because Formula One is about rare opportunities, and drivers like Verstappen do not become available very often. That brings us to the first detail most rumors avoid. For a move like this to become realistic, McLaren would need more than money. It would need a reason to believe Verstappen could actually leave Red Bull. And somewhere behind the public statements, the denials, and the carefully controlled language, that possibility is what turned an ordinary paddock whisper into something much bigger. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. Because there is a major difference between interest, contact, and an agreement. In Formula One, those three things are often mixed together until they sound like the same story. A team can admire a driver without making an offer. A representative can speak to another team without starting formal negotiations. And a conversation can happen without producing any deal at all. That matters here. There is no verified public evidence of a completed secret agreement between Max Verstappen and McLaren. No confirmed contract. No official announcement. No document proving that a move has already been decided. But rumors do not become powerful because they are complete. They become powerful because they begin with one believable detail, then attach themselves to a much bigger fear. For Red Bull, that fear is simple. What happens if Verstappen begins to doubt the future? A driver at his level does not only judge the car he has today. He judges what the team may give him next season, the season after that, and under the next major change in Formula One. That is the part casual fans often miss. A fast car now does not guarantee a fast car later. Formula One can change quickly. New rules arrive. Technical leaders move. Internal pressure grows. A team that once looked untouchable can suddenly look vulnerable. Think of it like standing on a moving train. Everything feels stable while the train is traveling smoothly. But the moment the track begins to shake, everyone starts looking for the nearest secure place to hold on. Verstappen's position gives him more options than almost any other driver. He does not need to chase attention. Teams would chase him. He does not need to prove that he can win. He has already shown what happens when he has the machinery to control a championship. That creates a strange balance of power. Red Bull may hold the contract, but Verstappen holds the value. And when one person becomes that valuable, every disagreement becomes more serious. Every poor result creates more questions. Every public comment is studied for hidden meaning. A normal sentence can become a headline. A calm denial can create even more suspicion. And one private conversation can be transformed into a supposed secret deal before anyone knows what was actually said. But here is the detail that changes the entire rumor. McLaren would not need to promise Verstappen instant control. It would only need to convince him that its direction is safer. That word matters. Safer does not mean slower. It means stable, organized, predictable. A place where the driver believes the car will improve, the leadership will remain focused, and the pressure inside the team will not become more dangerous than the pressure on the track. For a championship driver, stability can be as valuable as raw speed. A quick car with a divided team can collapse. A slightly slower car with the right people, the right development, and a clear long-term plan can become the stronger choice. And McLaren's appeal would begin there. Not with a dramatic secret meeting. Not with a suitcase full of money. Not with a promise that Verstappen would become the undisputed center of the team. The real attraction would be the possibility of joining a project that appears to be moving forward while Red Bull faces questions about how long its current structure can remain intact. But that creates another problem. McLaren already has something Verstappen would immediately threaten. Balance. A team with two competitive drivers must manage ambition carefully. Both sides of the garage need to believe they have a fair chance. Engineers need trust. Strategists need calm. Drivers need confidence that one mistake will not permanently shift the team's support toward the other car. Now imagine placing Verstappen inside that system. His reputation would enter the building before he did. Every upgrade would be examined. Every strategy call would be questioned. Every difference between the cars would become part of a wider argument. Was one driver being favored? Was the team changing direction around Verstappen? Was the existing partnership still equal? Those questions would not wait for a crisis. They would begin on the first day. And that means any McLaren interest, even informal interest, would carry a hidden cost. The team would not simply be choosing Verstappen. It would be choosing what happens to everyone already there. That is why the word secret works so well in this story. Not because a secret deal has been proven. Because any serious discussion would almost certainly need to remain private until McLaren knew exactly how to manage the consequences. A public approach could damage trust with its current drivers. A public refusal could close a door that may become valuable later. And public confirmation could trigger a chain reaction across the entire grid. Other teams would begin planning. Sponsors would start asking questions. Drivers would contact rivals. Contracts that once looked secure would suddenly become uncertain. One conversation could move far beyond Verstappen and McLaren. It could affect several careers at once. And this is where the rumor stops being only about one driver changing teams. It becomes a struggle over the future balance of Formula One. Because if Verstappen ever became genuinely available, McLaren would not be the only team thinking about him. Every competitive project would have to ask the same question. Can we afford to ignore the best opportunity on the market? And then comes the harder question. Can we afford the disruption required to take it? That is the conflict at the center of this story. McLaren may represent possibility. Red Bull represents power, history, and the system Verstappen already knows. Leaving would mean giving up certainty for a new kind of control. Staying would mean trusting that Red Bull can protect everything that made the partnership successful. And the decision would not be based on one race, one argument, or one rumor. It would depend on something deeper. Who can offer Verstappen the strongest future when the sport changes again? That answer is where the real pressure begins. And that pressure does not stay inside one garage. The moment a driver like Max Verstappen is linked with another top team, everyone begins reacting, even when nobody says very much. Team principals become careful. Drivers become alert. Managers start making calls. And journalists begin listening for changes in language that would normally pass unnoticed. That is how Formula One rumors grow. Not through one dramatic confession, but through a series of tiny signals. A sentence that sounds more cautious than usual. A denial that avoids one specific word. A public show of confidence that feels just a little too deliberate. None of those things proves a deal. But together, they create pressure. And pressure changes behavior. For McLaren, the first reaction would have to come from inside. The team already has two drivers with their own ambitions, their own supporters, and their own belief that they can become the central figure of the project. That belief matters more than it appears. A driver does not only race the car. A driver also races for influence inside the team. Engineers listen more closely to the driver whose feedback they trust. Strategy groups respond more quickly to the driver they believe can deliver the bigger result. Senior leaders naturally begin to shape decisions around whoever looks most likely to lead the team forward. Now introduce Verstappen. His presence would immediately change that balance. Even before he completed a single lap, people would assume the team was preparing to build around him. That assumption alone could create tension. One driver might feel pushed aside. Another might wonder whether promises made in private still mattered. Engineers might begin choosing their words more carefully. And suddenly, a team known for progress could find itself managing personalities instead of performance. That sounds like an internal problem. But it would spread much further. Other teams would start watching McLaren's driver situation with extraordinary interest. Because one move at the front of the grid can open a seat somewhere else. That opens another seat. Then another. It is like pulling one card from the bottom of a carefully balanced tower. The first movement may look small, but the whole structure begins to shift. This is why a Verstappen move could affect drivers who have nothing to do with the original rumor. A current McLaren driver could become available. Another team might suddenly delay its own contract decision. A younger driver could see an unexpected opportunity. A veteran could lose one. The rumor would become a chain reaction. And this is where rival teams would face a difficult choice. Do they dismiss the story publicly and risk being caught unprepared? Or do they quietly plan for a possibility they may not believe is real? Top teams almost never ignore major uncertainty. They prepare. They study contracts. They speak with managers. They explore backup options. Not because they know a move will happen, but because being surprised in Formula One can cost years. And Red Bull would understand that better than anyone. The public message would need to remain strong. Confidence. Commitment. Continuity. But privately, the team would have to ask a much more uncomfortable question. What if Verstappen's belief in the project begins to weaken? That question is more dangerous than any single poor result. A driver can accept one difficult weekend. A driver can accept a bad strategy call. A driver can even accept a season that does not go exactly as planned. What becomes harder to accept is the feeling that the future is becoming less certain. And once that feeling begins, every problem looks different. A technical failure is no longer just a technical failure. It becomes evidence. A leadership disagreement is no longer just an internal argument. It becomes a warning. A slow development step is no longer just one missed target. It becomes a reason to question the entire direction of the team. That is how trust begins to erode. Not all at once. Piece by piece. And Verstappen's position makes that process especially powerful. Most drivers worry about whether a top team would want them. Verstappen can ask whether a top team deserves him. That changes every negotiation. It changes who must persuade whom. It changes how long he can wait. And it changes how much uncertainty other teams are willing to tolerate. McLaren would know this. Red Bull would know this. And every serious rival would know this. But there is another reaction that matters just as much. The reaction from Verstappen himself. Not a public statement. Not a headline. The private calculation. Does he believe McLaren could give him a better chance over the next phase of Formula One? Does he trust the people running the project? Would he accept sharing influence in a team that has already been built around other drivers? And perhaps most importantly, would he be willing to leave the environment that helped turn him into the most dominant force of his era? That decision would not be emotional in the simple sense. It would be deeply personal, but also brutally practical. A driver has a limited career. The years pass quickly. Every season spent in the wrong car is a season that cannot be recovered. That creates urgency, even for someone who has already achieved almost everything. Championship drivers do not only want to win again. They want to protect the possibility of winning again. And that is why the next stage of this story matters so much. Because the biggest consequence of a Verstappen move would not be the shock of seeing him in different colors. It would be what happens after the first announcement. The pressure inside McLaren. The response from Red Bull. The effect on both existing drivers. The technical direction of the new team. And the question nobody could avoid. Would McLaren become stronger by signing Verstappen, or would the team destroy the balance that made it attractive in the first place? That is where this stops being a fantasy transfer. It becomes a risk calculation. And the answer is far less obvious than the rumor suggests.